Welcome everybody, I am Ed Cruz and this is the last lesson. This is episode 2. I'm doing stuff out of order, but so be it. Episode 2, and this is basically on the concept of actually targeting. Sounds like a simple idea, sounds like a simple concept, but it takes time to develop this ability, and I want to walk you through the process of how this comes about, or how you develop it to become better in Wing Chun. And you remember when I talk aspects of Wing Chun applies to anything and everything. If you can do Wing Chun, there's nothing you can't do. It's just the art's designed so well, so perfectly that if you really understand how the functionality of the art is, you can apply the concept to whatever you want. You want to cook. You want to do some other thing, do some other thing. Like I always say, Wing Chun isn't the end goal. Wing Chun is basically the vehicle that develops your skill that you can apply to anything else. So with that being said, we talk about targeting, and then, for example, we have something as we imagine in Wing Chun you have a target, your opponent's center of gravity. We can go into detail about that later. Your opponent's center of gravity. When we look at your opponent's center of gravity, that's what we want to hit. That's what we're trying to gun for. But the problem is, you're thinking to yourself, okay, let's say you're practicing chi sao, for example, with your partner or sticky hands, and all of a sudden you throw an attack, or he throws an attack, and next thing you know, the attack's coming into you, and then you're trying to block the attack, and you may block the attack, but next thing you know, what should be the target, which is your opponent, the hands end up being the target instead. Okay, so you're wondering to yourself, frick, I know that the individual's root of the center of gravity is always a target when it comes to practicing, but how come I can't maintain the target all the time? And I think I've mentioned this before in my previous sites, but you have your target and you have thought that follows before it. In order to be able to target on a consistent basis, that thought can't exist. And the thought exists, and there's nothing wrong with the thought. You need the thought. The thought exists because basically you train to trust. And the thought exists because you haven't done enough of the training to trust what you're doing, okay? So in other words, if you're punching right now, you're punching, and if you practice properly, you have an awareness about thought and physical process, a mental and physical process that's happening. Am I doing this right? Does it feel right? Yada, 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 okay? But if you're like, okay, here's my target. Next thing you know, you're supposed to target. And next thing you know, you drift and you're looking at your hands. You're not sure exactly, and maybe it could be, I'm not in the right position. Maybe I don't have the right tension. Maybe the motion's off and so forth like that. And there's nothing freaking wrong with that, because that is the process that it basically goes through. And I'm going to break it down to you. You have basically your target. You have the thought process, which is the training thing, the thought that's occurring, right? And then basically the end result is PMB. And that's my own saying, that practice more, bitch. That's basically what it means. So until you get to the process where it's like, your hands, you can trust, let's say, and you have 3 structures that you're controlling: legs, body, and arm, right? Until you get to the process where you're like, okay, imagine the 3 structures as kids, right? You have 3 kids, and you're like, okay, you make sure you don't burn the house. You wash your dishes, and you go do your homework. You're gonna be on a consistent basis making sure you're checking what one person's doing, what the other kid's doing, and the other kid's doing, over and over again, until you come to the point where you're like, I go check Pablo or whatever, and Pablo is like, frick, he's on his phone. Well, you can't trust it because he's not there. You're not there at that point. It's no different Pablo being the kid who doesn't do his homework to you not sure if your center of gravity is exactly where it should be, or the hand motions there should be, or the tension it should be where it needs to be. So that's all fine and dandy. That just simply means that in order to target, you got to free yourself from the thought. In order to free yourself from the thought, you got to train until you can trust what you're doing. And in order to train what you trust you're doing, you go to the 3rd section, this PMB. Practice more, bitch, and stop complaining, right? That's all it is. And there's not, like, all the process that you need is basically within those steps. So if you're at the point where you're like maybe 70% I'm aiming at target. Oh shoot, all of a sudden I'm not aiming at target. That's just you got to go through, and you can go through the checklist over and over again. What needs more improvement? Like people say, oh, I understand Yichikima. You understand Yichikima, but can you make Yichikima really function naturally, right? A lot of times people feel the force and they adjust their Yichikima after the force. Proper Yichikima reaction is, if the force comes in, automatically my body reacts to it. Notice I am not involved in the process of making sure my center of gravity adjusts to that force. I control what I need to control for my center of gravity to, when the force comes in, to react naturally, right? To react naturally. So in the end, this is a relatively short video where if the targeting is still difficult for you to maintain, and don't be frustrated, it's like, what the frick? I know he said that to target. You can't, you just can't, because if thought, just ask yourself, is there some thought process or some question that, if there's a thought process involved, that means there's no way you can consistently target. And if there's a thought process involved, that means you basically haven't trained enough to trust what you're doing. And then that basically means go to the next stage, practice more bitch, and then realize exactly what you need to work on to actually be able to be like, okay, he won't burn the house, he's gonna do the dishes, and he's gonna do his homework, all right? So if that's something that's been frustrating you for some time being, understand that what's causing that, what's leading that, and hopefully that helps.